Rachel Maurice is the Unconventional MD, and she's my friend from the quantum health space that I absolutely adore. So, Rachel is so much fun to have a conversation with. I had a whole list of things that I wanted to ask her, and I just found that I was having so much fun just listening to her that I didn't get to everything on the list. But what we did talk about, I think is so interesting. I know you're really going to enjoy this one. She talks about her journey from being a conventional doc to becoming an unconventional, understanding more about energy and quantum health. And so you're going to enjoy that. I really wanted to go deeper in a couple of areas, especially when she was talking about cholesterol and why that's protective in the body. So I want to have Rachel back. We touched on so many things, and I think it was the kind of touching on things that you'll get enough information to feel like you're getting it, but you may want us to go deeper. So listen to the whole thing. There are gems all the way through on this one. So you're going to listen to the end of the episode and then let us know in the comments what you thought of the episode. And if you want me to have Rachel back on, let me know what were the things that you thought were really important to go back and talk to Rachel more about those. Okay. So I hope you enjoy the episode and thank you for being here. Rachel, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
Yeah, so I want to start by talking a little bit about life before quantum health. Just as a doctor, whatever parts you want to talk about, but then what led you to quantum?
Okay, perfect. So I guess we would start with myself growing up in a household that was very, I guess, traditional middle class. My father was a physician. My mother ended up with a few different careers, but in law, sort of in the end. And so just, heavy influence on academia and schooling. And I just had more of an aptitude for sciences, so that I just kind of ended up going in that direction. And so I knew I wanted to work with people going through school, and I didn't like sort of sitting by myself in a lab. So
Okay.
so that led me more towards becoming a clinician. And so I ended up going into medicine because
Mhm.
it was like a nice fit. And for me, I'd always thought of myself as someone who prioritized health and was very conscientious about my health. And, my household growing up, there was proper food. I don't think we had the same kind of, I mean, there was processed food, obviously, like there were the TV dinners. I don't know if you remember that. Those were
Oh, of
like my
course I
favorite.
loved. There was one that I loved. Yeah.
And what's really funny is I remember it's funny the things that stick with you that bring up the emotions, right? Like in your body and in your memory. And those TV dinners, they came in that tin foil,
Yeah.
the tin foil and that tinny taste when you ate it. I liked it, which is so bizarre. But anyways, um,
But other
yeah,
than that, there was healthy food in the house,
yes,
an
yes.
emphasis on health.
Yes. And so my understanding of health at the time had to do basically with exercise and nutrition.
Right.
That's, what I was taught, what I was surrounded by. We didn't have the social media influence at that time, right? And so even going into medicine, most people that I would say, were in my medical school class and residency and so on, had really poor eating habits.
Right.
And, it kind of came with the territory of the environment and the lifestyle because everyone who goes through medicine and residency, you have a disrupted circadian rhythm. Depending on the specialty you go into, it could be more or less. But myself, I went into anesthesia. And so when I was on call, it actually meant that I was up most of the night because there's always a lineup of emergency surgeries. So that's what we would work our way through rather than some people waiting at home, maybe being able to get a bit of sleep till they would get a call to have to come into the hospital or something.
Hmm.
So yeah, poor, when you're tired, you just put anything in your mouth to stay awake.
Right.
So like it's true. And then you want to stay awake, and in particular myself. I mean, most people who are up in the night, it is of a critical nature. So you need to be at least on top of your game as much as possible. And so you need that caffeine, some kind of energy.
Mhm.
I was not really one for drinking coffee. I just actually didn't like it. So I ended up getting those Starbucks, caramel macchiato kind of things, which I
Mhm.
call a dessert in a cup because really it's just a bunch of sugar with some coffee in there. And I didn't notice anything really when I was younger. I would say I think I had enough resilience that my body just kind of bounced back. And, when I'd be on call, I could sleep the next day because I didn't actually have kids. I didn't get married and have kids till I was done my residency. So I could sleep the next day and I didn't feel too much actually in my body.
Mhm.
And so that was until I was 30. And then I got married and had kids, and unfortunately went through a divorce not too long after. And so I was under an inordinate amount of stress with young kids. And then my call when I would come home, I couldn't sleep because when you've got kids, you just can't sleep
Right.
because
They
you don't
need
have the
care.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so so that was my, early mid 30s,
Mhm.
and that's when I really started feeling my health decline. And I'd always been on the thin side,
Yeah.
but I noticed that again, I was needing anything for sustenance just to get through the day. And so
Mm.
my brain function was not working as well to make the proper decisions for my health.
Right.
And so, that led to me actually getting an ulcer, an esophageal ulcer. And, I was eating again. Now it sounds terrible. I'm talking about these TV dinners. Now this, I would eat Dairy Queen blizzards because it was one of the few things I could actually tolerate in my system, which, sounds a bit odd. But I had the classic signs of reflux, right? When you lie down and the food coming up, and I would get a burning sensation. But I was so kind of toxic with so many things, with the emotions and the stress and not eating very well and caffeine and maybe exercising a bit, but not taking care of stuff that I now understand,
Mhm.
that I actually had spasm in my esophagus to the point that I felt that I was having a heart attack. And so that really woke me up because I wasn't even aware. This is how offline my brain was. I was not even aware of the symptoms I was having, which were classic for reflux, because I just wasn't thinking straight, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that I still didn't come across the quantum world at that point. I was still kind of living day to day, one day at a time, getting through a lot of the stress because my divorce spanned quite a few years, and we were in and out of court, and my kids were toddlers, and it was very, very trying. And then at one point, luckily, I came across Joe Dispenza, and that really changed it changed my whole life. It changed the trajectory of my life.
Mhm.
And he was so impactful because I was so heavily influenced by my left brain, and, that the right side, the creative side, listening to your intuition, just that side of your brain, they weren't connecting. And Joe Dispenza really walked me through the scientific understanding of, the world that we can't see,
Mhm.
which for the most part we're taught doesn't exist because we can't see it, right? It's just the programming that we've kind of been influenced by. And so it really opened up a whole new world for me. And around that time was the same time that my mom was diagnosed with cancer.
Mhm.
And she was okay with having surgery, but she was not okay with doing chemotherapy or radiation therapy. And I think in part that was because through my medical schooling and my residency and also working, I used to come home and tell her stories when I would talk to her about
Horrible stories. Yes.
everything that I would see take place in the hospital. And I had vowed to myself that I was never going to let myself get to a point where I needed to access that care. So, that should have told me something right away, right, about the system I was working in. But I thought I was helping. That's why I went into it was to help people. So that opened the door. She wanted me to help her find other ways, other strategies to help with cancer and, see if there was anything alternative out there. And that opened the door to the nutrition world for me, which I think is often a starting place for people traditionally trained to see that there are other ways, because we aren't taught anything. I mean, I can only speak for the Canadian system, but I hear from colleagues in other parts of the world that it's pretty similar. And even just before I left, so I haven't been working since 2021. Actually, so I haven't been working as an anesthesiologist since 2021 because of the mandates, which are still in place in British Columbia, Canada.
Mhm.
And before I left, it's a teaching hospital where I work, and I would ask the medical students and residents that would come through, just curious if they were learning anything, like if the curriculum had changed in the last, I guess, 25 years, since I'd been through, and they were learning anything about nutrition. And the unanimous response was, "Oh, do you mean the fluids like the TPN, which is through the intravenous when people can't eat, if they've had surgery?" I'm like, "No, I'm actually speaking about food that we grow and we eat." And so it's still not taught, right? The vital nature of nutrients and the minerals and vitamins. And I think it's kind of like a conceptual understanding, but it's not put into practice,
Right.
right? For most doctors. And so combining sort of what I was learning with Joe Dispenza and then nutrition and learning about the quantum. So that's really where I started to learn about the quantum world and quantum physics. I never thought personally, there's that, I think there's this idea of not ever knowing enough. A lot of people in different professions, and especially in medicine, you kind of feel like you never know enough. And I mean, you just have to get to a point of accepting you will never know everything, and it's always about learning. And so that's kind of the exciting part. But I would always feel, in a sense, lesser than, and thinking, who am I to understand anything about quantum physics? That's a whole other area that just is kind of elusive to me. But there are people out there who do explain, at least, on some simplified level. So there is some kind of understanding and connection that can be made.
Mhm.
And so that was that part of it. And then I'm not going to go too deep into this, but COVID hit.
Okay. Right.
And
And then the world turned upside down. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And my whole world kind of went awry. I didn't think that I was going to be gone from work kind of as a permanent thing, but I don't sit idle very well, and there was lots of information surfacing. And so I just started, trying to learn as much as I could. I had time on my hands. So I was trying to learn as much as I could about, everything that was going on.
Mhm.
And and that actually led me to Dr. Jack Cruz.
And then the
And
doors blew wide open.
and they did. And the first video that I saw from him was he was speaking on fluoride, which, I had heard lots of people talking about fluoride not being good, and lots of people not wanting to, along with um the other realm about, shots. There's, a community of people not wanting to give their kids, childhood shots and stuff like that. And so, you hear about that stuff, but like, I don't personally, I believe everyone has the choice to do what they want with their body and their lives. That's where I stand. So I don't pass judgment on anything, everyone to each their own. I had not at that time done much investigation behind a lot of things. Since I have, and so my understanding, and my decisions about things are different now.
Mhm.
But fluoride was one of those things. right? There's fluoride free toothpaste. We go to the dentist, you can, get the fluoride treatments. And I had no clue what he was talking about initially. And and then I started to think, well, this guy's pretty smart. I mean, he's a neurosurgeon. He started out as a dentist. He's an oral surgeon. What he's actually saying is logical, right? It's not just something that he's pulling out of thin air.
Mhm.
And so that led me to investigating and listening to all of his stuff, at least trying to understand all of his stuff. Um, his videos they're a little bit easier to listen to him speak than reading his blogs. Those are quite an effort, and a challenge, but very informative. And so at that time, I just backtrack a little bit. When I left the hospital, so it was in 2021, my sleep took a nosedive.
Right.
And so you'd think before that, with my sleep being messed up now for probably about 30 years, that I would have had trouble sleeping before, but I didn't. I would fall asleep, sleep through the night. I mean, I would wake up with the kids, but then I'd go back to sleep, no problem. And I don't know if it was just such a deep amount of sleep deprivation. I don't know.
Right.
But since I left, I was waking up. I would go to sleep fine, and then I would wake up several times throughout the night, and I would not be able to get back to sleep. And I know that there was a certain amount of stress because I had left work, but I had a lot of systems in place that, I could alleviate the stress. And I didn't feel like I was necessarily stressed.
Mhm.
So again, with Jack Cruz, I had tried a lot of things. I tried, changing up my exercise, eating healthy, um, eliminating caffeine completely because that's disruptive, right, to sleep. I had eliminated alcohol completely because that was also starting, it's not like I drank a lot, but then when I would drink for 2, 3 days, I would feel kind of crappy and my sleep would be off. So I did a lot of things that I thought were supposed to help my sleep,
Mhm.
and they didn't really do anything. And then I started hearing Jack Cruz talk about your light environment. And, I thought I'd never even thought about that before. It just
Right.
never even crossed my mind. And of course, everything he said made sense when you think about, the fact that we have evolved under natural light, under sunlight. And sunlight is a dynamic light, from sunrise to sunset, and certain frequencies come and go. And yes, that makes sense that that would affect our biology. And the fact that we've got periods of darkness, again, our body has things that we want to do during the day when we're awake, and other things that we want to do when we're asleep and in darkness. And so I have to tell you, with listening to him and finding this out, within 3 weeks, I had started to implement making sure that I was seeing the sunrise at that time of day, doing some more grounding,
Mhm.
and getting blue blocking glasses and blocking artificial light at night. And it was a complete life-changing experience.
Right.
And it was so shocking because it was so simple
Mhm.
and inexpensive, and just getting back to kind of nature and what we are naturally designed to be exposed to can have such a profound
Mhm.
impact. It was like, I mean, it still kind of surprises me. And it surprises me too when I talk with people who are struggling with their health, and I bring this up. I- it's really hard for people to actually digest it because it's too simple,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
too simple. It can't really work. I'm doing all these other things. I've tried 10 different diets. I've tried carnivore, I've tried keto, I've tried, the high fat, low fat, all this kind of stuff. And or exercising, trying to go to bed early, can't go to bed early, but the scrolling, especially nowadays with technology, it's hard to get away from,
Right.
really, especially
Mhm.
when you're around other people and you live in a city. Um,
Yeah.
it's challenging for people.
Yes. And then for it to be so simple, and I just it's interesting because I think a lot of us find more of the mindset Joe Dispenza information. And I just wonder, not that you would compare and contrast what you know about quantum health and what you learned from Joe, but just in case people don't know somehow, don't
Right.
know about Joe, can you talk any more? Do you have any insights about how they work together? How one need to come before the other? Anything like that?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. Like that's a really great question. And I know people who have gone, from the quantum biology part and then finding Joe
Mhm.
Dispenza
Right,
and how they do they are synergistic, right? They work together.
right.
And so Joe Dispenza's work really, really impacted me because first of all, it had to do with the way I came across him. The first interview that I saw with him had to do with the dynamics that we have in relationships and how there's an energetic connection. And because I was going through my divorce, I was doing a lot of self-work on relationships and what part I played in what was going on and where that came from. Not that there's blame, like I'm 100% not putting blame on something, but I was taking ownership and in the recognition of where my patterning came from,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so that's just what happens, right? Like we pass along relationship dynamics from one generation to the next. And, the biggest influence is your immediate family
Mhm,
because you spend so much time there. And so I started to see the relationship dynamics, but
mhm.
on the male side of my family. And Joe Dispenza was talking about how, when you get frustrated with someone and everyone's got people in their lives where they're like, if it would just be so much easier if I didn't have to interact with this person. But what he had brought up was, let's just say you take this person out of your life completely and you think, okay, great. I don't have to deal with that anymore. But that energetic bond is still there. And
Mhm.
so someone else, you will recreate that dynamic with someone else in your life. So until you start to work on that and break that down and kind of release that connection, it will happen over and over again. And so the way he takes people through that is through meditation,
Right,
which is something that I had not felt that I was able to do properly. I guess there's no proper way, but I
right.
felt like I wasn't doing it the way people described it
Mhm.
until I found him.
Right.
And the the meditation, and I still meditate actually daily at from the minute I had discovered him, I still do a daily meditation. I don't do it as long because his are kind of tailored towards like a minimum of an hour.
Mhm.
So I usually do a 25-minute one in the morning when I get up. But what spoke to me was the energy that's talked about in this sort of alternative world that I would say coming from a traditionally trained, with really emphasized left brain thinking of logical, what you can see, what is in front of you, what is evidence, over to this like this energy side. He walked me through understanding that. And what I see now clearly, which I
Mhm.
know a lot of others don't, is for example, in medicine, a lot of patients will go see their doctor for, let's say, a heart problem, or if they've got some kind
Mhm.
of cognitive issue. And some of the tests they will do is like an ECG, where you measure the electric current in the heart, or an EEG, you're measuring the electric current, in your brain.
Mhm.
So there's electricity happening in order for things to function.
Right.
And so, therefore, you have an electric current, you have a magnetic field from that. That is energy. But that part of medicine is not looked at all when it comes to the conventional side.
Right.
So even something as simple as that, being explained, and the fact that I had not even put anything like that together, it kind of made me think like I was highly conditioned, right? Highly conditioned in that system. But there is an energetic force in the body, and energy influences matter. And again, that is something I think that's hard, and it's not something tangible that one can see. However, again, little kind of slow drips of things. Like there's a the science of cymatics,
Mhm.
right? So you know that, but even for the listeners who don't, like it's cymatics. And that when you look it up, like on YouTube, there's tons of videos where basically, there's different materials, whether it be sand or salt or crystals or something that might be spread across a speaker, and then different frequencies of sound
Mhm.
being, put through that speaker, changing
Right.
the structure and patterns of that material is that you just allows you to visualize that energy influences matter. And what's even more interesting is if you look up cymatics, cornstarch and water, because cornstarch, when you mix cornstarch and water, it can be like if you move something through it slowly, it's like a liquid, but if you actually like hit it hard or quickly, it's hard, like solid. So anyways, if you put that on a speaker and you get frequencies, moving through it, it actually can create 3D structures.
Wow.
So so Joe Dispenza would talk about that in I went to a week-long workshop, which was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But he would talk about that, and then he would talk about how when you change the energy in the field, so this field of energy that we have around us, that again, we're led to believe was just empty space,
Mhm.
because we can't see it with our naked eyes, but there is an energy and people can feel it, right? You walk into a room and you can feel people's energy. But that energy can influence our physical bodies. And
Right.
so that's kind of what I had learned from him. And then I learned about kind of our subconscious programming through somebody called Jason Christoff, kind of took it a step further
Mhm.
when all of this stuff with COVID was introduced in 2020. And that's when I kind of learned that the subconscious programming is so profound, and it's so simple
Mhm.
because it really all has to do with the repetitive information in our environment
Mhm.
and how that is stored in our body, and we are just so unaware of it.
Right.
So much of what our behavior, our thoughts, our actions, are what we think is independent choices,
Yeah.
are actually programmed by our environment.
Right.
And so that kind of made me think a little bit more about the body and what we have stored in the body and what influences the body. And then coming to this light part and understanding how, light works on our body. Our body is made up of cells. Most people know that, our body is made up of, there's different figures out there. People say like 50 to 100 trillion cells or something, but cells, when you look more fundamentally, are made up of ultimately atoms. And so everything in our environment is comprised of atoms, which has, again, now things are always changing, right? Like we've got a nucleus and electrons around the atom. So you've got like positive and protons and neutrons and electrons, positives and negatives. And so we have positive and negative charges moving in our body.
Mhm.
And so light having an influence on those, makes sense that that is going to affect our cellular function as well.
Right.
And so that's really that is the idea of the quantum level when it comes to quantum biology. And so really that also ties in the energy component, right? Like it's a physical part that I can now understand, and I think sort of people can understand.
Yeah.
That's a physical part that is connected to energy.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest piece that's missing in kind of the traditional scientific world.
Right.
And that, goes back in history when it was separated. I think, I don't know if I'm going to get the names right. Like if it was like Descartes, there was the kind
Mhm.
of understanding of let's look at the body as a mechanism, a mechanistic kind of structure, and we'll leave the church to talk about the spirit, the energy. Like that's kind of where the
Mhm.
separation happened.
Right.
And I think I think there are a lot of us that are coming back to the understanding that it is the whole, that we need to be healthy for the whole to function.
Right.
And that is where health really is found when we go back to connecting everything and connecting to the earth as well, right? Like we are not disconnected, you know,
We're not
when we
separate.
look at,
Mhm.
go ahead, sorry.
We're not separate. Right, you're right.
We're
Mhm.
not. And if you even take a step back and look at the evolution of the last 100 years,
Mhm.
the more modern society gets, the more disconnected we get from our actual optimal functioning. So, kind of like a 30,000-foot view, it's actually quite clear why we are all getting sick. Like we're getting sicker as a society.
Mhm. Yeah. We're getting sicker as a society, and most people are looking to their doctors
Yes.
to help them understand.
Yes.
And there's so much emphasis still on what my doctor says and my doctor, and you can speak to what it's like to be a doctor in that environment and what it's doing physically, but also mentally. Like, I don't know if you want to speak to the mental health of, and we're looking to these are the folks that we're trying to get us healthy. Mhm.
Right.
Mm.
Right. And so I was thinking about, a few things. I walk every morning. I've got some like hills behind my house. So I feel so blessed to, be where I live. And, I do a lot of thinking there. And, you know, because I get asked a lot about, how I was in the system and how my thinking has changed and how that happened and what I think about what's going on still.
Yeah.
And going through medicine, we're not taught about health. There is no emphasis on health. Literally, we are taught about disease. We are taught about, we're taught about anatomy and physiology, kind of how the body works from a biochemical standpoint, not a quantum, you know, a
Right.
quantum biology standpoint, not an energetic standpoint, the biochemistry and the physics of the body, the anatomy. And then we go straight into pharmacology, right? So what receptors there are, what drugs are going to affect what receptors. And then we have courses called pathology, right? So that is a disease state. So there's something, I think there was, I thought the number was 26,000, but I think it's up to like 35,000 disease states in like the Merck manual. So that's how traditional medicine, right, has evolved. We separate everything into different diseases. And again, we're specializing and subspecializing. So many of the specialists, and honestly, for me, it was easier to subspecialize because I was thinking, initially when I was trying to decide what to do, I thought to be a family doctor would be so hard because you have to know about everything. You have to know a little bit about everything, and then you never feel like you have a grasp on anything in particular. So honestly, for the anybody watching, it's actually much easier to specialize because then you can kind of focus on something, but you do lose the bigger picture,
Mhm.
right? And so understanding that when we go through medicine, we're learning about disease, we're not learning about health. And, being in there, I've also spoken as well about my what's happened with me since I've left, because it's been almost 3 years that I haven't been working in the hospital environment. And I did not realize what a toxic environment I was working in. Because, like I didn't like to get involved in the politics of administrative stuff like that. So I go to work, do my work, come home, spend time with my family. That was my priority, being able to spend time with my family. And, the specialty I chose, I was able to leave work at work,
Mhm.
just because of the nature of anesthesia. There is always dynamics, right, when it comes to people working with people. And the environment was really not conducive to health emotionally, or, now at my understanding of quantum biology, just to kind of get that one out of the way first, because I can talk more on the other one after.
Yeah.
But being inside a hospital, you don't, I mean, myself in the operating room, we're not opening windows, right?
Mhm.
So we're getting the artificial light, which again, I don't even know what was in there because most hospitals are still old. So you're getting like the fluorescent and the halogen. And, if you're quote unquote lucky, which it's ironic to say that when the new hospitals are built, you get all LED.
I know, which is crazy that yep.
And then all of the technology, because everything is always shifting to more and more digital. So now you're kind of bathing in all of this non-native electromagnetic frequencies and the blue light. And
Mhm.
then most people working in the hospital do some kind of shift work. So your whole circadian rhythm is off. And then when you're not, feeling great, then, the exercise goes by the wayside for most people. The care for, feeding yourself properly nutritious food. And I have to tell you, that's one thing that has, I thought about, I just didn't think too much because I was like, well, I'm not going to be a patient in a hospital. But the food that is
Oh,
given to
I
patients
know.
is just atrocious.
Yes, I
I
know.
mean, it's worse than the TV dinners we were talking about at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then of course there's vending machines. So people who are doing the shift work, you go to the vending machine, which is all garbage. And, even if you bring food, you're still bringing stuff that you're like, well, I got to make sure that I'm awake at night. So, I'd bring chocolate covered almonds, right? Thinking, okay, well, dark chocolate, there's a little bit of benefit to dark chocolate maybe. And then there's the almonds, but it's still, the caffeine and disrupting, your sleep wake cycles.
Mhm.
And the other thing is um, anyone who's listening who has worked in a hospital will completely appreciate this, but there's always junk food being brought
I
in
mean,
the
yes.
staff room.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
if it's donuts, pizza, even the
Mhm.
potlucks,
Mhm.
cakes,
Mhm.
desserts. So
Mhm.
there is just processed and junk food everywhere for
Everywhere.
the staff to eat,
And you
right?
think about all the most important places, our schools, our hospitals, our places where the people are gathering at the police station, all the places that we want people to be sharp and
Yes.
on it. And this is what we're dealing with, the lighting, the environment, all the technology, and then the food is atrocious on top of it. So,
Yeah.
not a good recipe.
No, it's not conducive for health.
Right.
And it's not conducive for healing for the patients, even just being in the hospital.
Yeah.
Um, like someone that I know was just in the hospital. She tried to do everything she could to not have to go to the hospital, but she ended up there for 12 days.
Mm.
And she said 8 of the days she did not sleep
Mhm.
because, she was in a room with like this one man was like screaming all night. And then she got moved to another room, but this woman kept having issues. And, she was pressing the call bell for her. Someone didn't come for like an hour. And she said, I- it's not a healing environment, right? Like we know we
Mhm.
need that period of darkness, that period of sleep and rest for the repair to take place. And if you're not getting that, you're already compromised being a patient in the hospital. That's why you're there to begin with.
Right.
You are not going to heal in that environment. And then to get back to the sort of the emotional space,
Yeah.
um, I did not realize just how toxic it was until I left and how much cleaning up my energetic environment has shown me that what I was living in was really bad. And I don't think it's intentional, right? The people that work there,
Right.
but the again, everyone has the dynamics that they bring to the table from their upbringing. And medicine in particular, there's quite a hierarchy. And it's still very paternalistic. Despite a lot more women going into medicine, there is still a lot of emphasis held on kind of there's a male dominated presence there and way of behaving. So even a lot of the women in medicine take on that male energy. And
Mhm.
so there's heightened conflict. And so there's a lot of dysfunctional dynamics between people.
Mhm.
And that doesn't lend itself to like a cooperative, healthy space for the patients also. People aren't given the right tools either. Like, even though this is, it's obvious, people talk about it, there's a lot of emphasis placed on the fact that we do have to get along and we have to respect each other and treat each other the way we would like to be treated. It's not taken very seriously. And it's unfortunate. It's brought to people's attention, but it's really, in the end, swept under the rug.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, that trickles down to the patient care, unfortunately.
Right. I can see that.
And then again, what is looked at is, okay, let's do some counseling. Some people would, suggest counseling, or, the easiest thing for doctors to do is prescribe a medication.
Mhm.
And I have to tell you, when I was working for for the last 10 years, I'd go see patients in the preoperative area before bringing them to the operating room. A lot of times we would see them, days or weeks beforehand to make sure they were optimized, but you always check on them again just to go through everything before they come. And you would go through the list of medications. And I would say 90% of the people coming into the operating room were on a good 20 medications.
Mhm.
Almost everybody was on some kind of antidepressant, whether it was for depression or not, some kind of anxiety, for sleeping, but some kind of medication that is often we think of as a psychiatric
Or
type
a
of
mood
medication.
altering.
Yeah. And, it was honestly, it was mind blowing to me. And, I will just share here. It's not something that I actually, that I've even shared before on any interviews that I've had. But, going through my divorce, like
Right.
alluded to, was it was actually the worst experience of my life, and it spanned a long period of time. And, um, I mean, I'm grateful for what it has allowed me to, come to understand and become as well. But while I was going through it, it was awful.
Awful. Mhm.
And so at that time, I was put on, some medication.
Mhm.
I had 2 little toddlers, and, I was just trying to cope, and
Yeah.
it was challenging. And so that helped me just actually not give a crap about anything,
Mhm.
which, I felt numb, right, when I was put on it. But at the time, I needed that to get through my days, just,
Right.
at the beginning. And, getting off of that, it took a while, but getting off of that was a year-long struggle.
Process. Yes.
Yeah.
And you
And
are not alone there. I'm so grateful that you're sharing that because it's so common, particularly as moms. I was going to ask you as a mom too, you know, from a quantum perspective, what your thoughts are around that, but this is what we do. And this is really and I'm not knocking, I'm not judging. I've done my own,
yeah,
gone through my own stuff. And I think you don't know what else to do. And
yeah,
this, it seems very easy to
yeah,
do. But I hear this all the time. I'll just pop another Lexapro as opposed to fix your circadian rhythms. Like,
yeah,
I really don't think people understand how simple it is
yeah.
to do the things that are going to feel better. So I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's very prevalent.
Yeah, and, because I know a lot of people who have shared, similar experiences, and really are afraid to even try to get off of them.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you're familiar with, Kelly Brogan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Mhm.
So I started listening to her,
Mhm.
after I found Joe Dispenza. It kind of opened the door to quite a few different people, and I started listening to her. And full disclosure too, I grew up, my father was a psychiatrist.
Ah, okay. So pressure
So
on top of pressure on top of pressure. Okay.
so there's a lot. He didn't actually speak much, credit
Mhm.
to him. Everything was confidential, right? Like, he didn't talk a lot about work, right?
Right.
But there's a lot about the psychiatric world that is very dark, that
Mhm.
I did not understand. And I started to learn actually from Kelly Brogan.
Yeah.
And part of my job too, actually participated in psychiatry. And what I mean by that is the there are a lot of ECTs done, electroconvulsive therapy, for people who are refractory to conditions that medications don't work for. And,
Mhm.
I had always thought, well, how on earth would they have discovered that shocking somebody can help them? Like, where on earth did that come from? I
Mhm.
still am not 100% sure. My understanding is that people who had seizures,
Right.
who were dealing with whatever issues seemed to be better afterwards. But I would do anesthetics. I would give anesthetics for ECTs. And then after learning more about, psychiatry, and, thankfully I'm not doing that anymore, but I was just horrified that I participated in that.
Mhm.
From what I understand now, there's really there are no studies to show all of these chemical imbalances that were taught in medical school exist,
Right.
in psychiatry. Like, we are taught that in medical school. So if you ask any doctor out there, they will say, just like, the medication, the SSRIs, the serotonin, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors to increase your serotonin
Right.
is what is needed. There's no study to actually show that.
No.
So
Mm.
these people who are prescribed these medications, are done so for what? And it's not an ill intention by the doctor,
No.
just a not knowing. And I was reading a book the other day that said,
Mhm.
missing information. It was a quote, and I can't remember who the quote was from, but it was missing information equals missing truth,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And I know Jack Cruz often says,
Mhm.
um, half truths lead to full lies,
Mm.
right? So we don't know what we don't know, and we're always learning. But it's just, it's so, I'm so grateful to have come across this quantum world. And, it's not just Jack Cruz. Like, he opened up the door, and there's so
Right.
many people that are sharing and do it in such a lovely and caring and easy way to understand.
Mhm.
And having said that, if you want to go down the science rabbit hole of it, and, read the technical part, which can be very complicated, you can do that. But to implement that for the average person, it's not difficult,
It's
right?
not. That's right. That's right.
So,
Mhm.
I think that that's a big factor. But what was I gonna say? I was gonna say something else. I think when I got off, like, I really was at a point where I was like, I want to get all these toxins out of my body. Like, all these things. There were some other things that I was just like, I need to clean up my body. And so it took a year for me to get off of
Yeah.
that. And I
Mhm.
did realize how my body had changed being on it, right? And then coming to this quantum biology realm, realizing that our light environment can optimize all of our hormones properly, our
And our
neurotransmitters.
neurotransmitters.
Yes. And and it's not difficult. Like, there are lifestyle changes that you have to make. And that we've been conditioned to, be comfortable in society and not like change. And so when we get comfortable, we just want things to stay the same. But the lifestyle changes are not difficult to make. And I think, for people who are taking responsibility for their health, and I would encourage people, like, that is the way to really get your health back,
Yeah.
is not to be dependent on other people,
Mhm.
um, and other systems. But, those changes can then become habits that are not, you know, they're not onerous at all. They really
Right.
are.
They really aren't. At first, it can feel a little overwhelming, and the
Yes.
information, and you're like, "Wait, what do I do?" But it really, if you just keep in mind that there's no hurry, there's nowhere to get, you're actually harmonizing with your natural environment. So it's actually very simple. And just to take own I really do take responsibility for your own health, wherever you are in it. And I think relying so much on physicians and other people and whatever you read in the public, whatever's available to us, just
Yeah.
question that and use it for how you might want to use it, but understand that when it comes to your own health, you might not want to be looking there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even when it comes to something like cholesterol,
Oh,
right?
oh, we could go on for days about cholesterol, Rachel. I dug way into the research there. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yes,
And
go ahead.
well, no, I was just gonna say, like, you talk to the average physician, and
Mhm,
they still don't understand that cholesterol is the precursor to, your steroid hormones. They are the
mhm,
building blocks of your nervous system, your brain and your spinal cord and your nerves, and the fat that surrounds the spinal cord that allows the communication to happen.
yeah,
The vital nature of cholesterol is still not understood by most doctors. And
mhm,
I have to say I did not quite understand that either when I was, working when I before I kind of started, opening up my mind and seeing all these things. There's an indoctrination, and there's a type of, I think, something I was going to say before that had left my mind, but there's almost a rite of passage
mhm,
in the medical system when you go through
mhm,
how people are treated, what you have to go through. um, it's quite traumatizing when you first enter, and it's a bit shocking. But then, you look to other people, and everyone's like, people who are ahead of you, oh, that's just the way it is. You get through it, don't take it personally. And it's not right. I have to say, like, it's not right. And it's unfortunate that it still happens.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was something that I was reminded of, and I just wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it's that way in a lot of fields, and it's like, if you going through and saying, "Well, this doesn't seem right," or you start to say, "Well, what about cholesterol being protective in the body?" You're shut down, and it's like, "Well,
Right.
you're a newbie, you obviously don't you've gotta be quiet." And it just and then you get more indoctrinated, and you just move on through and learn to do as you're told, and I mean, for me, there were a lot of hoops to jump through, and you
Right.
just have to jump through them. It's
Right.
just,
Yeah.
if whether they make sense or they don't, you jump through them.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and with this, so with the quantum biology, like my learning and my understanding,
Yeah.
I started to learn about mitochondria,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Which is something that, again, is only briefly touched on in medicine as producing ATP and the right?
Yes, crazy.
Um,
Mhm,
there are some people who obviously have gone and dug deeper and, in traditional medicine, but the average physician, the average doctor is not taught much beyond that. And so
mhm,
learning how mitochondria play such a vital role in water production and communication, in helping with repair and regeneration, and production of hormones, right? Coming from cholesterol to pregnenolone, and then producing the cortisol and the sex steroids. But my focus kind of went in the direction of red light therapy, right? That was kind of my go-to when people would ask me if that they because they wanted a gadget. Lots of people, they want some kind of fix, even if it is something that is natural. And so you know, for me, the red light panels kind of like um
mhm.
the pillar, right? Because it targets the mitochondria and it helps optimize the mitochondria, which can then help optimize the rest of the body.
Yes.
And I just wanted to kind of bring this up because maybe for listeners, I'm wearing this little patch here,
Oh,
but
yes, because I was gonna ask about what's nourishing you, and I know that's part of what's nourishing your body, mind, soul lately. So
yes, yes. And it's something that I had heard about probably about a year and a half ago from the quantum biology community, because having gone through the quantum biology collective, the course, um, Dr. Stillman, being one of the faculty, I think had brought up, talking about these patches. And I didn't really pay too much attention to it because I'd heard that it had to do with light. But again, it was something that, I thought, I've got my red light panel, I have my practices, and if it has to do with light, I'm good with kind of harnessing what is naturally available. And and then what took me to dive deeper was actually a year and a half later, where I started. I was working with a client, and this was with some other work that I do with trauma work.
Mhm.
And we had taken a little bit of a break, and then she said, I'm ready to come back. I'm ready to work on this stuff because she'd gone through, I'm not going to go through the details, but she'd gone through a lot of horrible stuff. And we got on a Zoom call, and she looked phenomenal. Right? And I was like, wait a
What are
second.
you doing?
All
Yeah.
all of these things you've told me about, and you're coming to work, through these traumas. And she looked radiant. She looked just glowing. And I said, what's going on? Because you don't look like you've been dealing with all of this stuff that you're talking about. And she said, well, I've started on these patches. So that's when I was like, I got to look into this a little bit further.
Mhm.
And I started looking into it, and then actually Meredith from the QBC had
Mhm.
David Schmidt, the inventor of these patches, on her podcast. And so that's, I started doing some investigating, and the reason why I kind of jumped in was because of my mom. And so my mom,
Mhm.
although I had mentioned before that she had been diagnosed with cancer, it didn't have to do with cancer, but her health was taking a downturn. She's got heart issues, and she started to develop heart failure.
Okay.
And she's also got sleep apnea. She's metabolically unhealthy. She's got a low thyroid, and she's just, there's a lot of issues there. And what I had discovered was I was speaking to a nurse who had been a cardiac surgical nurse for about 20 years in New York. She no longer does that. She left with the pandemic as well. But she had entered into the LifeWave. So these patches, the company's called LifeWave. She had entered into that company and had been there for, I think she'd been there for a year and a half. And so she told me some of the testimonials and the things that she had seen with heart patients with these patches she had never seen in her 20-year career in the cardiac surgical space. And so for me, I was like, you know what? My mom is going to try them if she can avoid heart surgery like that, because I know that you can get anybody through surgery. You can get anybody through surgery. It's just the after part
Right.
that, people tend to decline. And, my mom would not be a candidate that would do well.
Mhm.
So we were going to do this. I investigated more because it's not like the idea of it is like a pill in the sense that you're doing something to your
Mm.
body that's from the outside, but the patches basically are non-transdermal, so nothing from the patch goes into your body. The patent is in the white part, and what it does is it basically acts like a mirror, so it reflects key frequencies of infrared light that we emit already back into our body.
Oh, cool.
And depending on the patch, it will have a biological effect depending on the frequencies that it reflects back. So the biological effect from the patch that he released in 2020 called the X39 is that it increases a specific copper peptide that we already naturally have that declines as we age. So it increases that copper peptide. And that copper peptide, I didn't know. I didn't know actually any of this beforehand, but that copper peptide is apparently known as the fountain of youth. It's GHKCU. So it's just a 3 amino acid peptide.
Mhm.
And it has a whole host of effects, including resetting about 4,000 genes to a younger state. But the biggest thing is that it increases your own stem cell activity and proliferation. And so stem cells, again, I didn't know this before. By the time we're 30, half of our stem cells have gone dormant. And by the time we're 60, 90% of our stem cells have gone dormant. And stem cells, for listeners who are not aware, are basically the cells that can turn into any cell in the body that's needed. They go to any damaged site, and they do the repair and the regeneration and the replacement of damaged cells. So that's why as we get older, that's one of the reasons as we get older, we just don't heal as well from things. Kids are so resilient. They
Mhm.
fall, they get bruised, they bounce around, they get up, and they're good to go.
Mhm.
With us, we fall, maybe takes a couple days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks to kind of feel like you're good to go again.
Mhm.
And so with the patches, it for me, it was in alignment with everything that I was learning and that I was okay with, because it's not putting anything from outside into the body. It's harnessing the power of our body already to just kind of upregulate and support what our body already knows how to do. And
Right.
so,
So it's
you know,
essentially like using our own light back into us,
yes,
magnifying it, basically.
yes, yes.
Very cool. Yeah.
It is. It is. And also the company's 20 years old, so it's not a new company.
Mhm.
And this isn't the first patch that he developed. Like, he worked with the Navy SEALs. He worked with the Department of Defense and created this technology for the Navy SEALs so they wouldn't have to be on the uppers, the caffeine and all that stuff that is,
Mhm.
toxic to our bodies. He was creating a natural way for them to increase their energy and be able to, do what they needed to do for their missions. And so that was the kind of inception of this technology. And then
Right.
he got into the longevity space and
And
created
then
this patch, which increases your stem cells, because other ones do other things, but this is kind of the pièce de résistance, I would say, because, you know, increasing your stem cells can heal just about anything that's in the body. It's not, and again, I have to clarify, that a disclaimer, this is a wellness product, right? It is
mhm.
not meant to cure, treat, or anything. It supports the body's own mechanism. The body does the healing. It does
Mhm.
not do anything. The body does the healing.
Mhm.
But I just have to share that my mom,
Yes.
so after 3 weeks, so my mom, we would go for walks on a daily basis, and she, has trouble breathing because of the heart failure.
Yep.
And, we would walk with my dog that would stop to sniff everything. So that was the pace we could go at. And within a couple weeks, I noticed her picking up the pace because I walk pretty fast on my own. And I noticed that we were actually walking a little bit faster, which, I kind of brought to her attention. She said, yeah, actually, I am noticing that. And, that again, that's also a subjective thing,
Mhm.
but she's been getting regular blood work because of her heart failure. So they're tweaking her medications, but she added on her blood work, her thyroid function tests, because
Mhm.
she just wanted to see what was going on with them. And she came over one day, and this was 3 weeks after starting these patches. She
Mhm.
said, can you read this for me? Because, it's not within the normal range, and what's going on. And so I looked at them, I looked at her labs, and I said, I'm not going to be your doctor. You go to your doctor and let him, do, because you should never, you should never
Treat
treat your
your own
family.
family. Yep, got it. Mhm.
I said, but I wouldn't be surprised if he lowers your thyroid medication. And so sure enough, she came back. She went to him the next day. She came back. She said, yeah, he lowered it. He lowered it by a half. And she's subsequently had, some tests since, and her, the numbers went up and they were starting to come down again. And it looks like she's going to have to lower it again.
Mhm.
So, that's pretty significant for, I mean, she was excited because, and then in her mind, it's like, this is doing something,
You're
right?
right.
So I think that's one of the big things that this can help with people. They start to see some small changes. It gives them the motivation to actually go on the path of leading a healthy lifestyle, because it's not a replacement by any means, right?
Right.
It's not, you have to live a healthy lifestyle. This is just a tool to kind of help you, give you a nudge in the right direction. So,
Mhm. And it sounds like it doesn't interfere with medications except that you need to monitor what you're doing because you might have to
yes.
come down.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. So I've been sharing, because it was new to me, and I was sharing with people that are close to me that I know have issues, just saying, like, do you want to try them? Because they've got like a 90-day money back guarantee too, as right. So there really, to me, is no downside to trying them. And they're not expensive. They're $100 a month, right? Like, and I know people who spend, on naturopaths, acupuncture, all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
Herbs, all the supplements, everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And so some of the people I've been sharing with have had the most profound effects when it comes to relieving pain, like very quickly. Someone who had sciatica for 5 years she, within 3 hours, she was like, my pain is gone. And I was like, seriously? Like, how can that be? Like, both of us were like, and she's like, and none, the medication never touched it. You know, she'd had it for 5 years and she was never without pain.
Right. That's amazing. And I guess I'm just like, there are a lot of us that are doing all the things. We're doing all the light. Our light environment is
Yes,
optimized, but we still
yes,
have toxins around us. I mean, there's
yes,
no way to get it all out, but there are still little lingering things that can be
yes,
going on that if you could use your own light reflected in to magnify that to heal, I don't think there's anything more powerful than the light inside of us. So
yes, I agree.
anything that influences that light,
Yeah.
I think, and that mitochondria makes the light, makes the water.
Right,
So anything that supports the mitochondria makes sense to me.
right, right.
Yeah.
And people still have trouble believing that we produce light. And one of the things that I share with people though is, if you think about like the military, and they use the, night vision goggles where they're basically seeing people from the infrared heat,
Heat. Mhm.
which is emitted, which is light,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's because it's invisible, most people don't see that.
Again,
It's not.
it's the thing, if we can't see it, it doesn't exist, but it's all the light we cannot see, it's all the things we cannot see that end up being the most impactful on
Right.
our health, our vitality, our experience. I mean, I could talk to you for hours and hours. I mean, I wanna do so many episodes with you because we could just break
Oh,
down
thank you.
cholesterol, and I
Yes.
mean, we really didn't even talk that much about light, inside of us.
Yeah.
So, but I'm mindful of our time, so I'm so grateful. Is there anything else you wanted to share that really nourishes your body, mind, soul these days?
Well, I have to say, I have found that time is so precious,
Mm,
and everybody, I feel like there's so many things that pull on us for our time. And I hear over and over again, like, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. I've got my hands in all these different things. And, what I would just like to encourage people, and what I really am trying to do for myself, is again, kind of stepping back to take that 30,000-foot view and look at what it is you want out of life and what you feel brings you joy, and allow yourself time for that in your day, even if it's 5 minutes,
mhm,
because everything else can truly wait. Like, it really can. And being mindful of who is in your space,
mhm.
because it affects your energy and your mood, and which ultimately affects your health, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it can be challenging with family.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, you have to look after yourself, because
Mhm.
looking after yourself ultimately really helps look after everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah, I've always known that, but I feel like I really feel that at a deeper level now. That whole put your mask on first.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's truly, if you're doing the work and you're taking really good care of yourself, you're much more present and able to help other people. So,
Yeah. And they feel that, right? They
right, because
feel
it's all
that.
energy, it's
Yeah.
all frequency anyway.
Yeah.
So, really cool. And I'll link in the show notes to you, and then can people get the patches? How do we help people understand about the patches?
Yeah, so it is, it would be through a distributor. Like, you could sign up through me.
Okay.
They're not available in stores. The inventor, it's purposeful how he decided to, create how it's sold. So yeah.
Okay, but people can get them through you. So
Yes.
that's great.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, then we'll make sure that, because I'm sure there are people that are gonna want some patches. I'm thinking I've got to get a patch on my mother as quickly as possible. Because she has a lot of the same as your mom. So I'm glad your mom is doing better and she's taking care of taking these steps.
Yes.
And I'm really grateful she has you because
Yeah.
I'm sure she's grateful that she has you too.
Yes.
So, well, thank you so much, Rachel. This has been so good.
Thank you.
We talked about a lot of things I didn't think we were going to talk about. So it's been a really fun time to have you on the show.
Thank you. And it's been so nice to be here. And it's such a nice it's a nice environment and feeling. It's very warm. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.